Robert Plank Show, episode 201, Podcast Guesting. Grow your audience, get more traffic, and increase your digital reach with Heather Havenwood. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Robert Plank Show. This is the podcast where we talk about making money, and we're joined today by Heather Ann Havenwood. And she's been marketing an online business since 1999, and in 2006 she started and developed and grew an online information marketing publishing company from ground zero to over $1 million in sales in less than 12 months. We're going to talk about all kinds of fun stuff today. How are things today, Heather?
I'm wonderful. I am wonderful today. Friday. It's Friday.
It is, and I'm looking forward to the weekend and the coming weekend, the coming month, and all kinds of stuff like that. And so, I mean, tell me about yourself. Like, what is it that you do, and what is your focus these days?
So my name is Heather Havenwood, and I'm here in Austin, Texas. And honestly, what I'm focused on right now is a couple things. One, being a guest on podcasts like we're doing now and sharing my story, and then teaching other people how they can be a guest on radio, podcast, anything audio, right? And back in the day, I got started as I started traveling the country back in 2000. I call it back in the day, right? 2001 to 2007. I traveled the country where we would create and develop seminars. So I love the idea of podcasting because I'm sitting here by myself, hanging out, talking to you. I didn't have to travel. I didn't have to get, a suitcase. I didn't have to go through TW, get all through all that process of traveling. And nowadays we can use our voice to actually get out there in front of other people's audiences through guesting. So I'm focused a lot on that. I also have a dating business called datingtriggers.com where I educate men on how to talk to and communicate and attract women. And then with my boyfriend and I, we have a supplement company that just got launched in 2016. So extremely busy, lots of fun, and having a good time in Austin.
Awesome. I mean, it sounds like you have all those boxes ticked. And so you're talking about a lot of your business, a lot of your traffic, so as from guesting on a podcast, it's replaced maybe a lot of your speaking and your traveling. And so when you talk about being guests on a podcast, I mean, how often are we talking? Is this something that you do, every day, once a week, 5 times a day? How often are you doing this?
So I started, it's a great question, Robert. And so I started on accident back in August 2015. So we're about a year plus a few months. And I got started, I did one on accident. And then I got a client out of it like 2 weeks later. And I thought, well, this is cool, So I started really focusing on it. So up until this time, we're talking now November 2016, I've been on a roughly about 180, almost 190 podcasts. Well, I've been on other people's podcasts, right? So there's weeks I do up to 9. This week I've done 3. Where I'm on other people's podcasts. I also now have just started my own podcast, but that was after almost 9 months. And so what I learned was I learned the art of sharing, being on your show. My job here is to add value to you and your people. That's my job, right? To make you the star, not me, and to add as much value as I possibly can. And then after 8 months, I then said, okay, now I get the business of it. I'm willing now to have my own show. So I've been on around 180, 190 other people's shows up until this point. So it's a lot. 5, average 3 to 5 a week.
I mean, and it sounds like it. And I'm sort of going in the reverse direction as you. Like, I think we're on episode 201 now, and it's only recently have I even thought of this whole thing of going on other people's podcasts, and I mean, there's a lot of great stuff, right? Because the guests that I've had on my show, now I sort of know them. Now I have a little bit of an in with them. So if I want to be on their show, now I know them. And then for you, I mean, you have the same advantage, right? Because you have been on all these other podcasts. Now you know these people. Now you can have these other guests on your show too.
Yeah, here's how it happened is because back in 2013, you can still find it on iTunes. I started a show called Sexy Boss Show. I had no clue what I was doing, Robert. I think I did like 4 or 5 interviews of friends, and I put them all the same day. I really had no idea what I was doing. I didn't get that medium, And so I just forget this. I'm done. This makes no sense, right? I don't understand. And I just stopped it. And then fast forward 2015, when someone said, hey, come on my show. And then I got a client. I thought, okay, this is an amazing opportunity to go and learn the business first by being a guest. And so what I mean by I focus 100% on being a guest, that's what all I focused on. My job was to add value. My job was to support you. I always promoted my hosts like you, right? I will promote this show, and I always do that. And people were like amazed, like, oh my God, you're promoting my show. I'm like, of course. Why would I not, right? The show has me talking about me. Why would I not promote me? So I started doing that. And the cool thing was I call the green room, like the jewels in the green room, because afterwards I would get off the Skype call or whatnot and go, okay, tell me, like, how's it working for you? Like, tell me the software you're using. Tell me what you've learned after the last 100 or 200 episodes. And they would tell me all the jewels. I'm like, oh, this is great. So when I got started in June, it was 8-9 months later, I was like, I'm ready to go. Like, I knew exactly what pitfalls to avoid. I knew exactly what to do and not do, because I had this opportunity to learn first, right, by being on other people's show. And if you look at most mediums, like if I was a TV person, if I wanted to all of a sudden become an Oprah or whatever, Oprah first was on TV. She was on other people's shows first before she's like, I'm ready to create my own platform. And it started to make more sense. So the second time around, I've been able to launch successfully, right? It's called the Win with Heather Havenwood. So yeah, it's kind of a reverse portion of it, but it's working for me.
And that's cool. And you kind of got the bugs worked out. And that Win with Heather Havenwood podcast, where can people subscribe to that one?
They can iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. I got on iHeart recently. I'm all excited. Woo woo. And they can go to heatherhavenwood.com/podcast show, and they can click on that and just download it. But it's in all the great locations. The fun part about, I think we've what I call verse psychology in any kind of business. It's like back in the day in the seminar world. When I started traveling, I first helped other people create their seminars. Like, I wasn't the voice. Like, they were in the front of the room and I watched them pitch, and I was the one like handling the room, like handling the logistics. And then over time, when someone goes, now it's your turn to start speaking, I was more comfortable in the space, right? Versus just like, here's a mic, go for it, right? So it's a kind of a reverse psychology that's overworked for me in different mediums, not just this particular medium, like going backwards. And now I know all the tips and tricks. And what's also cool about it, Robert, just like you said, the moment I launched mine, I mean, I have so many interviews lined up. I think my editor is like, I think you're good through like January 2017. You know what I mean? Because everyone was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll be in your show because you were on mine. So it was easy to reverse that and to help other people and support them.
Awesome. And I think you and I are on similar paths here, because I think I have like 70 guests lined up between now and February. So, I mean, we're kind of on the same page, right? As far as, well, we kind of fooled around, made all the mistakes, figured out how to do it, and then scale it. And so you mentioned that, so you were on all these shows, and you asked all these guests about like the pitfalls about, having a podcast or being guests on podcasts, or how to, deal better with the guests, or how to be a better guest. So like, what sort of pitfalls off the top of your head have people shared with you in all your podcasting travels?
God, there's so many, right? So let me think. The first one was like what I call the technology. Like, I chose Libsyn, right? I asked a bunch of people, they're like, gotta go with Libsyn. I'm like, okay. And stuff like that. And then like how to do show notes. Like, does that even work? Is that good thing? They're like, yeah, here's how you best do it. I'm like, okay. And like all these little like fun things that the nuances of it. And then of course, like, how do you actually grow your audience? Like, how does that work? Got to ask a bunch of questions about that. And like iHeart, I knew when that was coming down the pipe, like really early. So I was like, oh, look, I'm on iHeart. So it's kind of fun, stuff like that. But I think the big one was the key thing I learned is more what I learned for me, which is how to share my story over a 25 or 30-minute conversation. Right? That it's not a sales pitch. What I learned about podcasting is that it's not a sales pitch. I feel like right now you and I, Robert, are hanging out having coffee here in Austin, right? We're just having a conversation, and then other people get to listen in. Right? That's kind of what's happening. That's how I view it. Versus a presentation. If there's an audience of 200 and I'm presenting at them, I'm speaking at them, and that's what podcast podcasting is not, okay, I feel like I'm on top of my words here, but podcasting is not a presentation where I'm speaking at you. It's a conversation where I share my story, I share value, I share tips and tricks, and then people listen in to our chat. So I just got back last night from Internet Marketing Party here in Austin. There was like 150 people there or something like that. It was crazy. Dan Rose spoke of Six Pack Shortcuts, and a lot of dear friends of mine that are there who are master internet marketers. And all we do is we go there, we hang out, we have a cocktail, and then someone speaks for 30 minutes, and they do exactly what we're doing right now. They just share their story, and they share a tip or trick or two, right? And we do travel there and park and the whole 9 yards, right? So podcasting is being able to do that on a scale, on a level, and that's what I was really able to understand the medium.
Awesome. And so do you ever notice, like, when you go on some of these podcasts, like, I mean, there's different personalities, different people speak in different ways. And have you noticed that, I mean, like, for sure, sometimes you get on a show and it's just kind of a back and forth conversation. Do you ever get on a show where the host is just not talkative at all, or not a very good conversationalist anytime?
Oh my God, yes. I call it pulling, right? Hopefully you're not pulling from me right now, like I'm giving, right? There's like an energy to it. And I don't know if you experience this, but I know I have, where I've been on a show with the host and they kind of were like, okay, what's your name? Go. It's just like, can you ask me something? Because it's really a conversation. It's not a presentation. And a presentation, when I was in the speaking world, how that would work is, if I was the MC, as we call it, like, I'm going to tell you how amazing Robert is. Robert is this is who he is. Okay, here's Robert, right? And then I walk off stage and I don't come back on stage. I don't interrupt you as the presenter, right? But that's not how podcasting works. And so lots of times people don't understand that. They want me to present like a presenter, or like on a webinar. If I'm on someone else's, if someone did a promotion to their list, a webinar is not a conversation. It's a teaching with a sales tactic, right? We're going to teach, and then we're going to ask you to buy something because of the teaching, right? It's less of a share and more of a technique plus a sales. And in podcasting really is, we're just having a conversation. And a lot of people have a hard time with that. I know for another one that I think is interesting is, when I'm a host now and I got someone recently, I could tell they've had what I call PR training. You know what I'm talking about? Like TV training. So when I asked them, like, well, tell me about yourself, Robert, they spoke in sound bites.
Oh, geez.
Right? Like, I am, they said it like a two sentences flat. And then I was like, I guess I got to ask you another question. We could have been done with that interview in like 6 minutes. And I'm like, it couldn't go anywhere. It was so hard to pull the information out because they were taught in PR. Because if you're on TV, you got 3 minutes max. Boom, 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 question, you're out, right? So in TV, the PR is sound bites. In podcasting, it's a story. Like, you want to hear a story. People want to hear stories and be able to relate to them or agree with them or disagree with them. Right. So it is definitely interesting. And then the other one is a presenter. I had a really big time speaker on me, big time. The guy's like big time in the speaking world. And he's on my show. And I remember he's so used to presenting. He's used to the example I had earlier, Robert, which is like, this is who he is. And then I'm off the stage. Right. And so when I'd ask him a question, he would go into presentation mode, and I would now and then I'd interrupt, like, tell me more about that or something. And he would like get irritated. I'm like, this is a conversation, dude. This is not a speech. So I think that's part of the medium, people learning that. And that was the one thing that I learned really well in that, over almost 200 interviews at this point.
Of like the extremes to avoid, and sort of like, like, at least like the way that I go into an interview sort of as a host is I guess my mindset is, I'm going to kind of start off by figuring out like what makes the person stand out, and then if that kind of runs out of gas, then I'll kind of move on to like what's their origin story or something, and then there might be something to unpack there, and then if that sort of runs out of gas, then I might ask them for like a case study with one of their clients, and usually there's something to unpack there. But even if that runs out of gas, then I'll ask them about like a mistake that they see everyone making, or like a thing that really like frustrates them. And if that runs out of gas, because like you said, sometimes I'll get like a 2-minute or a 3-minute answer, and then if that runs out, then I will literally I mean, I don't know if I should say this, but I guess we're just saying everything. Like, I'll pull up their website, and I'll get to their blog section, and I'll just kind of say like, well, I noticed on your blog you recently talked about that. So even if I'm really, like you said, like I'm really pulling the information out of them, at least I kind of have all those fallbacks. And so do you kind of have something similar like that? Like if you come on a show, do you have like a worst case scenario, or like something in the can, I guess, if the conversation isn't going well, like something just to say?
First of all, you're adorable. I'm cracking up over here. I love that. Like, if that runs out of gas, I got this. I'm not as strategic as you as the planning stage. So I might just take that on for myself with you, because that's really good.
Feel free.
That was really awesome. I just have to say, like, oh, I can see the logic there, where he's going. That's awesome. Okay, so as a guest, I'll speak from that perspective. I haven't had to go there. I mean, as a guest, I have had someone who's on the other side, who's what I call a dud, a low energy person, as I call it. So what's interesting about that, Robert, is the year before I started podcasting, on accident, I actually did a year of improvisation. I actually went to classes for a full year and learned the art of improv. And the art of improv is truly just podcasting, right? Because you and I have never met. You and I have never really exchanged much of an email communication other than just like a calendar and a date and time. And part of improv is you get up on stage and they just literally say, you're in a spaceship, go. And you have to make it all up. And so there's literally strategies with improvisation that they call it rules of improv. One of them is yes and, right? So you can say, we're on Mars now. I go, yes. And we're now in like a cool thing, right? Like, it's all about yes and. So I use the rules I learned at improvisation inside of podcasting, because one of the deaths of improvisation is if you go onto a scene and then you make the other person wrong. Like, we're on Mars. Like, no, we're not on Mars. We're on planet Neptune or something. You can't make the other person wrong. That's one of the rules. You can't make what they ever said incorrect. And so that's part of podcasting. I think if I'm the guest and you're the host, or vice versa, I make you amazing. Everything you say is great. Everything you say is yes. And so sometimes people will take something the wrong way. And I'm like, yeah, and I'll turn the conversation to something else, but I won't make them wrong. Like, you're wrong for saying that. You know what I mean? That's one of the rules I do. And I think with that just creates flow. Right. So it's a conversation. It's like a chat. Like I really visualize you and I just hanging out, having coffee, right, on 6th Street or something in Austin. Where do you live, by the way? Where do you live?
I'm in California.
Okay, great.
Near, like, Modesto, Stockton.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's cool.
And I'm glad that you brought those couple of things up, because I think back again to, because I mean, like I said, like I'm thinking back to past episodes on how I can be a better host. I'm thinking into the future on how I can be a guest, and it sounds like everyone listening should be hopping on these different podcasts to be a guest. Yeah. And I can think back to some people, and I guess some people are more mismatchers than matchers, and some of these people that I've had on like disagree with almost everything I say, and I kind of have to. I almost feel like I'm scrambling to sort of please them, or I've had times where the person, like I guess if someone's really high energy, like I said, like I'll kind of do my best to match them, or if they speak really slow, I'll do my best to kind of match them. And every now and then I'll come across someone where they speak really fast and then they slow it way down, and I'm kind of having to scramble to keep up. I mean, have you ever come across that, where like the personality conflict is so extreme, where not necessarily they're kind of a dud like you said, but you're just having to do all this work just to talk to them? Do you ever come across something like that?
Yeah, you've done way more podcasts than I have as a host, right? So just get that clear. Mine's only been since June. I think I'm on like 27 or 28, right? What's cool about the current interviews is most of them I interviewed on their shows, so we already had this great rapport. But there have been a few I've gotten cold recommendations, and I remember this one particular that after it's not a good interview when. It should be like a tagline. It's not a good interview when ... When you come off the interview and I want to pass out, like I'm like, that was so much work. Oh my God, I'm exhausted. And it shouldn't be that challenging, like a 45-minute or 30-minute conversation. There was one, I actually canned that. I'm not going to, I figured myself, I'm falling asleep. Other people could have fallen asleep, so I canned it. And then the other one was that big time speaker I had on, where it was like pulling teeth for him to go in any other direction, because it's like he has this canned speech prepared. in his head because he's been doing it for like 25 years. So he had this canned speech. So anytime I interrupted that, he would get upset. Or Pat would interrupt. He would be like, don't interrupt me. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay,
Right.
this is my stage. Let's just. So I felt like there was a dominant stuff going on, like what I call submissive dominant. But I'd rather have it more play. Like we're playing right now. If you interrupt me, that's fine. It's your stage. I'm here to serve you. I'm your guest in your house. It's not vice versa. So I think that those are the few that I've had that I just don't think that people understand the medium. And that's why I tell people I'm the one of the ones saying, don't start a podcast. Go be a guest, because a couple things happen, Robert, when you're a guest. You start to share your story over and over and over again, and you start to get really good at sharing your story. And I say that it's very different than a networking event. If you and I go to a networking event and I go, Robert, what do you do? And you'll say like a sentence, right? And then I'll say like, I'm a marketer or something like simple. And there's nothing there. But in a podcast, when you say, well, tell me about yourself, there's like space to actually share. Right. And so that's the difference. And people get all weirded out by that. And so that's where the practice comes in from. I always tell people, go get on podcasts, because you can start to learn to share about yourself, your story, what you did, how you did, and when you have a practice of that, it's easier to do in other arenas.
And so, as far as sharing your story, I mean, do you notice that the podcast interviews that you hop on, like, are maybe a good chunk of them very identical? Like, do some of them sort of go more or less the same path, almost where you could almost kind of do it in your sleep?
There's a consistency to it. Absolutely. Because here's why there's a consistency to it. Because at the end of the day, Robert, you and I as human beings, we haven't changed much in the centuries and centuries. Now, there's things called Facebook and the tools have changed, iPhones, whatever. But we as human beings haven't changed. We all love listening to stories. We relate to stories. We disagree with the story. We can connect with or disconnect with the story, right? So I can tell you tips and tricks all day and it's fine. But we as human beings, we share through stories, right? Grandparents and generational, it's through stories. So I think this particular medium is a medium for us sharing our story. And I have no problem sharing my story. Actually, what's interesting is like a therapeutic piece of it, because I went through a massive bankruptcy and a foreclosure. And I remember when it all happened, I thought, I'll never share this ever. Don't ever ask me about it, And here I am 6 years later sharing it constantly, because I also have I overcame that and now very successful. And I want to share the story that if I can do it, you can do it. Whatever your situation is, right? Divorce, whatever. Everyone has their ups and downs. So it doesn't get old for me at all. It almost becomes a therapeutic piece.
Awesome. And I think that, I can relate to that when I listen to podcasts and things like that. If I'm listening to like a podcast, and if I'm on a walk or in my car, like I do like to get all the tips and tricks in there, but I really appreciate the stories, especially like the overcoming adversity stuff, because it's almost like a light listening or like a light reading, right? As opposed to like getting all this step by step figured out. It's like, okay, I can just kind of listen to this thing, and I can maybe half listen to it if I'm driving, and I can get something. It's like everybody gets something different out of it, right? Because you tell the story with all these little things to pick up on.
Yeah, it's true. And what's really weird about this medium in the last year, I've never been like a talk radio girl. Like I go and listen to talk radio. But this last year, because I've been really focused on this medium, I'm out there listening to the Dana Show. She's got a big show, and Rush Limbaugh, and all these like big time, talk radio people. And I'm listening to them on how they share stories. I mean, Rush Limbaugh's a master. So is Howard Stern. They're masters at interviewing, and they're masters at sharing a story. Where literally, there have been times I'm listening to them, and I don't want to get out of the car, or like I got to turn something. I don't want to turn it off because they're in the middle of this story. They're just keeping me right there. You know what I mean? Like, how are they doing that? It's so amazing. And that's why they're successful. It's because they're able to invoke emotion through the stories, like them or not. They actually, a long time ago, the survey is not recent, but years ago, they said that over 50% of the people that listen to Howard Stern hate him. But they listen to him. Huh? It's because the emotion of listening to him, they like it or not, and they enjoy that emotion. So I think that's what podcasting is about. And you
and that they hate the personality, but they like the conversation and all that stuff.
right. They're like, I can't believe he said that. And they're still listening, right? You're like, well, then turn it off. No, I want to hear what he has to ask next, And so it is an interesting study. Why do people listen to certain podcasts and certain not? Well, they love the personality, they love the people, they love the interaction and the conversations, and what I call lifting the hood. That's why when I get someone on if I'm the host and they're the guest, if I get someone on they're talking in talking points, it's not fun to listen to that. It's like, okay, sounds like you're scripted, boring, right? So it's not going to help me. It's not going to help them. I want to know why they're doing what they're doing. I had a guest on. I just actually posted it. Kate, this woman, Kate, she actually is a financial planner. And I told her, I don't want to talk about financial planning. That's the most boring thing on the planet. I said, but I'm really interested. You've been in this education piece. She's like written for Forbes, all kinds of what I call financial magazines and stuff over the years. And I said, I want to talk about the industry of financial education, like the industry. She's like, yeah, I was a journalism for Wall Street. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Like, who pays for that? And she's explaining the business behind financial education. Like when you turn on CNBC, like who are these people? Who makes them all great? So it's two different industries, and what's their purpose and what are they selling? And it was a very interesting conversation, and I thought it was way more evoking than to just tell us about financial planning.
Right.
Boring, boring alert.
And so this is all good stuff. I mean as a podcast guest, we should focus on having a story and not for someone to sort of pull all these things out of us. And we shouldn't talk in those short talking points. Great for TV, not great for podcasting. And so when someone is planning on hopping on different podcasts, should they be what sort of thought should they be putting into their story? Should they be like thinking about it ahead of time, or trying to figure out like the before and after, or the emotional, or do you think they should just jump on in and kind of figure it out as they go?
Great question, and great insight on that, Robert. And actually, I just did, and I really just kind of semi-plugging only because I just completed this like yesterday, right? So I'm doing a course right now called Podcast 3030, and where I'm teaching people how to guest. And I just did like an hour talking, presentation really to them, teaching the art of the story. And I went through them each detail, called the hero's journey. Right? The hero's journey, probably heard of that. It's actually a stage, like a 6-stage process that every single movie in the world that's successful, by the way, actually follows. Once you learn what I call the story of that, the staging of that, every single movie you ever see ever again will like follow it to a T, right? And I broke that down such that you can place what we call your story, your personal story, on top of that sequence, right? In a fast, effective way. Now, it's not going to take 2 hours. It's going to take 2-3 minutes. So I was able to, share that. And it's really the hero's journey. And I talk about that book. You're welcome to get that or buy it. It's a pretty thick, crazy book, but I broke it down in an hour of how do I share my story in a way that literally falls on top of the actual progress, the staging of stage 1 through 6. And the reason why it's so powerful, hero's journey, is because since the beginning of time, since biblical times, is that we can open up the Bible today, right, or not, and read a story biblically, and we can re-understand it, and we can relate to it in some way, and we see the lesson in it. Why? Because we are story. We like story. We like to be told stories. We are storytellers. So that particular hero's journey actually breaks it down. But in general, it's about teaching people your story, what you go, the up and down, the ups and downs, about 2 or 3 ups and downs in the hero's journey. That was a very long answer. I apologize. But I just did like an entire hour presentation on that.
Long answer, but it's a good answer. And I know I watched for that. I noticed that a little bit, just as far as that Joseph Campbell, the hero with 1,000 faces, like Star Wars is the same as the Matrix, the same as the Force Awakens, and all that stuff. And I think that's a good template, and everyone should be using that. And so this podcast 3030, so this is a course that you have coming out, or is it out, or?
Yeah, it just came out. The first students are going through it, and it's teaching people how to be, I call it the guesting, how to be a guest. a couple ways. I teach them how to share their story, but then I also teach them how to get them to people like you to say yes to them easily. Because I can't remember how we got connected, to be honest, Robert. I think it was in a few connections. I'm not sure. But there was somewhere along the way, either you or your assistant, right, saw my page, my media page, and within 5 seconds, they said yes or no. And that's how people are hosts. Like I send them my media page, heatherhavenwood.com/media, and I set up the page very strategically in such a way that you as a host will say yes or no fast. And that's the job of it. So I teach them how to get people to say yes to you easily and effortlessly. Right. And then how do you get on the show and be an amazing guest so that you as a host are not pulling stuff from them, right, and running out of gas over and over and over again. Like I don't want them to do that. So I'm educating and teaching people how to do that. It's called Podcast 30/30. And the reason I say that is because the challenge is do 30 podcasts in 30 days.
Awesome. I think that's a good goal. And so am I hearing you right in that not only do you teach in your podcast 30/30 like how to be a good guest on shows and that, but what to put and how to make the media page, is that included with that also?
It is. And I'm sure you've noticed people have like what I call these long bios. They're actually like resumes.
Right, I have.
Like, I don't want your resume. I want a bio. Well, what's the difference? If you go to my LinkedIn page, you get a resume. I mean, it's like 5 pages long or something ridiculous, right? It's everything I've ever done ever. Well, you don't want that as a host. It's just, right. You want quick to the point, who you are, who you're not. You got a book, don't got a book, what's your deal? Like really quickly. So there's a way to actually create your bio such a way for media, right? So I go over that. I go over one sheet. I go over like the high resolution images I have on there. I mean, I go over all these pieces because I want you as a host, like you might do all your own stuff. You might have an assistant. You might have 3 assistants. I don't know. But either way, I want you to be able to send one link to them and go, everything's right here, right? Cut, paste, grab links, whatever it is. Make people have it easy for people to say yes to you. And I don't know if you experienced this, Robert, but I just experienced this like a few weeks ago. So I had someone that came on that I've known for years, and he's a big time in his own right, like whatever. And I get him on, and I go, your bio is written in first person, right? So it's like, I, Robert, have done this. So when I'm reading it, I had to go copy paste it and reverse it into Robert has done this. Like, who does their bio in first person? So stuff like this. And I was like irritated because he's just making me do more work. Right. So I was like, have people say yes to you easily and do the heavy lifting for them. Like do the bio so all they have to do is like read it
Right.
or not, or say a piece of it or not. And you get the gist of it. So I go through that. I also go through the story. And then I also go through how did I get almost out of 200? I'm at like 180, 190. How did I do that? I mean, how did I reach out to that many shows in a year? And what was what I call cold emails, I call it. How did I do that? And so I go through that process too. It's called the sales process, right? So that I go into that. How do you sell yourself? And everyone wants to get an agency. Well, agencies are great. And I do have one that I work with, but they did not give me the 200. There's no way. They didn't even come close to that. Probably a third, maybe. I did the rest. I did all that heavy lifting. How did I do that? And why? So I go through that in the course as well.
Awesome. And I looked up how we connected. What happened was I posted about my podcast on Radio Guest List, and then you reached out. But then Interview Connections emailed me a couple months later, and then I said, oh yeah, Heather's already on the schedule. But so it's kind of interesting that you have multiple ways. It's not just you have one way of getting on shows. You have all these other ways of reaching out. It sounds like. How many?
Yeah. I have 4. Okay. Different. So you got 2 of the 4, right? So Interview Connections is one, and then Radio Guest List is another one. But you work it. You have to work it. I mean, so Radio Guest List, it's a free service. Y'all know about it. And they just send you an email. But then that means you have to go and connect with them. And I do a little more than just blast an email. I remember going to your site and seeing it and going, okay, is this a fit? Yes. Okay, here's how I can position the email, right? And then I reached out to you, and here we are. I'm sorry, I don't remember because it's been like 2 or 3 months, right, since that first email I sent you.
Well, yeah, and it's okay because I don't remember either. And when I sort of do things from the other end, I mean, there was I think one day when I sent out like 120 different emails, just like just seeing if different people would be interested in my podcast. And then, all these like 20 replies would come in, and by the time I answered all 20, there'd be 10 more to answer. And so I can definitely relate to,
Yeah.
it's not like it's like a ton of work or a ton of data entry, and it is kind of fun, but there definitely is, if you want to get on 200 shows, I mean, you have to send out at least 200 emails, make 200 connections, right?
Yeah, and the other thing I exactly, but here's another thing that I am really big on. I learned this from the speaking industry, is you got to pull ego out of it, and I allow the host, you, to say if I'm a fit or not. However, I'm open to anything. So I've been on sports. I don't think about sports, right? But I'm able to turn sports into a business conversation. I'm able to what I call spin it, right? So I've been on a podcast that talks only to lawyers, right? I've been on all the ones that dog walkers. That was an interesting one. One focus on gift basket business. So I'm always a yes. I'm always a yes, and I'm always open. So I've been on a really spiritual one. I don't teach spirituality, right? I've been on I'm open to anything, right? So I think that's a key piece of what happens is people get really like, wow, I don't want to be on that one. It's like, you don't know who's really listening, really. You don't really, really know who's listening. Their intention is one thing, but you don't know who's listening. So you never know who's going to be the one that says, oh, I really want to work with them or not, or whatever.
Right, and I've kind of come across that with guests where, like I might reach out to like a mindset person, and then some of them have just been completely against the idea of showing up on an internet marketing podcast because they say, well, it's a business podcast. I don't want to talk about business. And I say to them like, well, I'd love to have you on because, people who are in business or people who are entrepreneurs, they need that mindset component. They've been only focusing on like the facts and figures or the tutorials or whatever, and they need the more like pseudo spiritual kind of stuff. And yeah, and so I've noticed that every now and then that a lot of people in other industries and stuff, they're against sort of crossing the line and going into a new different category. So I'm glad that you brought that up, that you can kind of fit your stuff into what the podcast is. And even on the email that you sent to me, like I'm looking at it right now, and you said, I saw your placement on radio guest list this afternoon. Your vision of robertplank.com is great for online marketers that make their money off webinars, podcasting, email marketing. I'm asking you to consider having me as a guest on your radio show in 2016, 2017. And then you had a link to your one sheet, some podcasts you've been on, your Amazon page, and then a link to set up the call. So I really appreciated that. That sentence number 2 or whatever that I said there, where you went and looked at the blog, and then that way I know that you kind of looked at it. And so when you, for example, like when you reached out to that podcast about the dog walkers, I mean, did you have to really change up that template? Did you really have to reach, or like what did you say to get on the dog walker podcast?
That one I do not remember. If I reach out to them, they reach out to me. I do remember that the lawyer one. Okay. And I think that was through Interview Connection. I just remember that one specifically. Interview Connections reached out and said, would you be interested? They were like, oh, we got this one. We don't know. Right. They first asked me first before usually it's the opposite. And I was like, yeah, like bring it on, lawyers. Like, I love that, because with lawyers, how I spun it was lawyers, even though no matter what their degree, their focus is or niches in lawyer, they all have to self-promote themselves. Right. It's all about self-promotion. It's all lawyership is. It's like self-promoting themselves all the time. And so they had their own stuff around that. So I went into talked about self-promotion and how you could do that and get away through that mindset of like how to sell yourself, right? The other one was the gift basking. That one was odd. That one I reached out to. I said, well, people who have gift basking business, they're online. So I focused on email marketing specifically and how they can really increase their business by being consistent in sharing packages, like creating packages for others, making it easy for people to say yes to them. Again, same concept, just spun it, right? So I've been open to, one of them was the sports one. That one was that one was fun because I don't know anything about sports. Like I know Cowboys, and I'm a Cowboys fan, and anything outside of that, like I don't know, and if they're winning or not. That's it. So. But we had this great fun talk and talked about business and how the business of football right? And what's going on with the business of football. And they added a bunch of pieces, and then we had a great conversation. So that one was a lot of fun. They were two like jocks, you know. So
Right.
it was fun. It was fun. The other one that was interesting that I got on. This guy only interviews people of the arts, as they call it, entertainers. And I'm not an actress. Like, he wants to interview actresses, right? And I'm like, look, I'm not an actress, but what I can do is talk to you about how actors and actresses and comedians, how they might be really good at their art, but again, they suck at self-promoting. They just suck at it. And so we had this great conversation about that. He's like, yeah, they're right. They really suck at it. They want the deal to come to them, right? So, like, yep, you can't do that. You got to go after it. You got to go after the audition, right? You got to go all the auditions. You can't just say, well, I don't want that position. You just got to go to the audition, show up, and see what happens. That's how I see it.
Whoops. That sounds like the way that you're spinning this sort of like you positioning your stuff for someone else. It sounds almost like the way to, like, the mindset is, well, there's this other group of people, and there's like a missing link in whatever they're trying to do, and then you have the solution. So you're saying, even though I'm not like you, I have the solution that you need to plug into in whatever you're doing, if you're an actress or anything else.
Yeah, I think we all get stuck in our own little space. I know in the internet marketing space, we can get really stuck in, like, this is our only world. There's no one else like that. And it's not true. I mean, I think if you start crossing to other industries, we all have the same challenges, right? So being able to spin it is key, no matter what your story is. I think everyone can do that. I think everyone can. And it's pretty powerful. But if you look at like what I call big media, right? So Jimmy Kimmel or interview shows or Oprah or Ellen or on and on it goes, right? Is that if you look at actors or actresses or authors, when they're on book tours, you ever seen that, movie tours or book tours? When a movie's going to come out, all of a sudden they start hitting everything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you see that, right? So what do they do? What are they doing? It's literally like a little podcast, and they're sharing their story. They're sharing about the book or movie. They're sharing something that happened, some story, something funny, so that people remember to go and then buy the book or go watch the movie. That is what this is like. And so I'm already now at a point where getting what I call second rounds coming through, meaning someone's like, hey, we want you back on. Right. In 6 months, we want you back on in 2 months and talk about this other thing. Because who says that I'm on your show once and I can never come back? Who says that? I mean, Jimmy Kimmel's had a couple times, right? Who says it's only a one-off thing? It's multiple times. Why not? Like, hey, last time you were on, we talked about this. Let's talk about more about that. Why not? So it's also the host being able to be open to, it's not always just a one-off interview and I'll never see you again. How do you build that relationship? So that's another thing that I'm taking on, is like, how does the big media do it? And how can I put that into this particular medium of podcasting?
That's a pretty good insight. That not only does showing up to podcast, not only does, like, the skill itself get easier, but then all these connections you're making, you can reuse that so that part gets easier. And so, I mean, we've kind of gone over time here, and I don't want to keep you too long, but sort of as we're winding this down, if you could wave a magic wand and every podcast show that you were on, like, did blank, like, did some kind of thing, like, what's on your wish list for something that you wish, like, every podcast host would do for you as a guest?
Oh, wow. Promote really heavy, because because I always promote, but I realize that a lot of hosts, if they put all this time into interviewing and setting it up and all these great things, they don't put a lot of time into the promotion of the show. And multi-purpose it. So when I have my show, I multi-purpose it. It's on YouTube. It's on the different audio, but I also do it on YouTube. Then I download that and upload that again to Facebook. So it's in multiple places. So that would be the one thing. The second thing is really, thank you for sharing about my podcast 3030. I invite people, if they're interested in guesting, I'd love for them to come check it out.
And where can they go to grab podcast 3030?
They can go to heatherhavenwood.com, and they can click on Work with Heather and set up a time, and I could give them the email. Or give them the website. Sorry, not the email.
Okay, so perfect. So the path for people to take is to go to heatherhavenwood.com and click on Work with Heather, and that gets them to everything, right? Does that get them to your books and all that cool stuff? and the
Yes, it
podcast?
does. And you know what? My assistant just texted me because she heard me and she told me that I'm wrong. Hold on. I'm making sure she's right before I say it to you, though. I think she's right. Okay, yeah. So you can go to heatherhavenwood.com/30. And there you can also just get to the podcast 3030. So heatherhavenwood.com/30.
Awesome. So everyone go right there, heatherhavenwood.com/30. So thanks for hopping on the show, Heather, and sharing not only your cool story with the ups and downs, but lots of interesting takeaways from not just how to be a better guest on shows, how to get guests on shows, lots of cool breakthroughs and things like that, even for me talking to you. So thanks for coming by the show.
You're welcome. Thanks, Robert.
Go right now to robertplank.com/iTunes to subscribe to the show, listen to other